They have it with all the governors giving out their spending plans for 2025. What's the revenue plan and expenditure? We're definitely going to get more. 2025 definitely going to be an interesting year going forward. But it's Christmas Eve. Let's get a sense of what's happening at the commodities market. And we have Mr. Bismarck Rouhani, CEO of Financial Derivatives Company. Great to have you, Mr. Rouhani.
Good morning, and thanks for having me this morning.
Good morning. So, compliments of the season. But before we get into the market now, we see President Bola Tinubu had his first media chat, with some selected journalists addressing critical, national issues. What were the key takeaways for you? Anything the president said that we could say could turn out bullish, for the markets and maybe bullish for consumers this season?
I think, quite frankly, what he said was that it's going to have a market-driven economy and that it's determined to ensure that subsidies are reduced and that the process of subsidies are directed and targeted at the vulnerable. That was his speech. He also alluded to the fact that in a competitive world, that the consumer is going to be king and that the price of petroleum products are beginning to actually stabilize. I think those were generally his comments. He did also talk about the fact that the emphasis on revenues and the emphasis on investment. So I think those were expected comments, and quite frankly, what he said what he had to say, and obviously the markets would tell us exactly what the implications of that would be in the near term.
All right, so, bringing out, talking about, PMS prices, and, definitely we see that's been the Achilles heel for consumers at this point. But we're seeing the war, the price war kind of heating up now with MRS announcing that petrol is now being sold at 935 naira at all filling stations. That's their branches nationwide. They also added that if you find any station not following this price, that consumers should actually report. So it shows that, we have some stations that might not want to, go with this new price. So I guess the question now is, how low can the price of PMS go, at this rate?
I think one thing that is important to note is that in an industry where there's an oligopoly, which is there are few suppliers and many buyers, the intensity of rivalry becomes very fierce at times. But there is a price leader and a price follower. What has happened clearly is the Dangote refinery is the price leader. They have 90 to 95% of the market share. They are producing at all, consistently and producing a quality. Therefore, it is they that will determine, one, the price, two, governed by their cost. And the cost is driven by two things. One, the international price of crude, and two, the exchange rate, the Naira-dollar exchange rate. Those things are moving positively. So as a price leader, the Dangote refinery has come up to establish, take a sword in the ground to say, this is the price. The Ipman and others are bound to follow. So what we see now is that is Dangote refinery a responsible supplier in a market that is an oligopoly? Yes, they are. Two, they are willing to reduce their cost and pass that on to the consumer. So today, the price at the refinery gate is $8.99. The price at the market is $9.35, and Ipman is following. What will that price be in 4 weeks from today? 4 weeks from today, with the price of crude maybe at about $72 a barrel, with the Naira stabilizing, we saw some 7% appreciation yesterday. We think that it is possible that you will be able to bring that price to as low as 900 Naira. But the president warned yesterday in a speech that we do not want to subsidize our neighbors. Therefore, to me as an economist, I think that the price of Nigerian PMS is going to be governed by two things. One, international price of crude, but two, the price at which our neighboring countries are selling. If not, we'll be passing on some of the benefits to the neighboring countries. So generally speaking, the important thing here is that the price of refined PMS diesel and kerosene will come down, based on what we see, and it will be sustainable into the months of January in 2025. In the oil markets, we really cannot start projecting much further than that. So by January 2025, you see the price there, and the effect of that is that inflation, the price of petrol and diesel is a major causative factor for inflation, and therefore, if these prices remain the way they are, then we will see that inflation will not begin to increase any further, will begin to moderate. The problem we have today is that the transporters, when the prices went up, they were very eager and fast in increasing their transport fares. But ever since the price started coming down, we have not noticed any reduction in transport fares, and we have not noticed any, like they say, prices are always sticky downwards. We have not seen that enthusiasm to actually bring down the general level of prices. So there's a lag between when policies are implemented and when the impact is felt. We think that in January, which is normal time for prices to come down after Christmas, the price of all of these commodities will begin to decline, and the price of transport fares begin to decline after the New Year ceremony.
Right. I guess I've not tasted this new price yet for PMS. I still have maybe the over 1,000 Naira one. That's in my tank right now. I need to try and get that before things change. But, Mr. Rani, let's look at the oil market now. We're seeing some kind of recovery there for Brent and WTI, even though WTI is still sub $70 this morning. What are you seeing playing out in the global oil market?
I think one thing is that the winter started. So if you're buying into the futures, you are buying actually into the spring season, which is in March, 90 days from today. I think that what is clear is that Saudi Arabia and Russia want higher prices, but they don't want to rock the boat. Trump wants lower prices. So there's some kind of accommodation between all parties, consumers and producers. But the reality is that at $70 a barrel, which is where WTI is, and $72 a barrel for Brent, it is still $3 below our benchmark price for the budget. So as far as Nigeria is concerned, it poses a major revenue challenge for Nigeria, right? But for the consumer in Nigeria who is buying petrol, it could be a good thing. But as a country, as an oil producer, in this situation, we are going to be having some challenges ahead. And we've also sold forward some of our oil. So our oil revenue is actually challenged. And the president made a remark yesterday to say that NNPC has not remitted anything and we have been able to meet our obligations. But that's not the ideal situation. That NNPC must remit. NNPC must organize itself to be a major contributor to the revenue profile of Nigeria. So while it is good that we have a buffer to withstand the shocks of NNPC's inefficiency, we now have to begin to look at how do we reform those institutions so that each and every one of them can begin to contribute their own towards the goal. We have a very, very tough 2025 ahead of us. But like I say, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going.
Right, the tough get going. I'm talking about being tough. How do you think the last-minute shopping, is going now? We're seeing that impacting on prices so far in the market. How are you seeing it?
Well, we've seen a noticeable increase in prices, and what amazed me was the rice is at 110, and onions is as high as 260,000, up 8%. Tomatoes are up 14% at 40,000, and pepper is up 30%. We think that because they are perishable, one, two, because the Christmas is only tomorrow and this week, those prices will increase until maybe later this evening. And as from tomorrow, we begin to see them flatlining. And then as from January 2nd, Thursday next week, we begin to see prices decline. But what is interesting, though, is that the Naira appreciated by 7% alone yesterday. Why? Because the bureau de changes are getting $25,000 a week from now till January 30th. Is it speculative depreciation, which means that the currency will start depreciating again in February? I'm not so sure. We had always said, and I've called it that by February, the currency will be trading at 1550. That was just our own arithmetical projection, but it just happens to be that it is going to play out. So if the currency value stays at 1550 in the parallel market, and you said just now that the NAFEM rate also went to that level, so there's some kind of convergence there. So from an economic perspective, those are efficient variables, and the way it's moving closer to its real equilibrium exchange rate. If all of these things happen, then you might see some stability, but we shouldn't get carried away by short-term directions of prices. In the long run, we need to increase productivity, we need to increase investment, and we have to stop the waste in government. I think those three things go together, and that's the key variable, that we need to stop the waste, we need to deploy resources efficiently, and we have to be patient, because this is not an overnight silver bullet. It's going to be a very hard struggle to get to where people begin to feel the impact and believe it the way it is.
All right, I guess, after the holidays, we'll gauge, maybe data will tell us how resilient the consumer was, and how the sellers were able to...
Do not buy too much, Ladi, don't buy too much.
Yeah.
Wait until January when the prices are coming down.
Yeah.
You can buy
then I'll buy my favorite live chicken, at that time.
Oh, yes. And don't forget, turkeys don't work for Christmas.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Ronnie, thank you so much. Always great having your perspective on the show. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll take a break now. When we come back, more conversations right here on Business Morning. Just stay with us.